What's up, my wizards? It's Deb. From Mtg, we like magic, and today I finally get to show you a list that I've been working on for over 6 weeks, because I know a broken card when I see it. So today, on the first day of Pro Tour Dominaria, I'm going to bring you green, red, amber aggro. Now, just to clarify, no, I don't expect this deck to show up at the Pro Tour, as awesome as that would be, but if I was one of the lucky ones involved in the event, I might actually consider registering this deck. I've got a ton of experience with it at this point, buttload of reps up under my belt with it, and it's gone through a lot more tuning than most decks go through for the channel. So as a result, I've got a lot of faith in this deck, and it does have the fastest starts in Standard by a wide margin. We're talking about 4-drop creatures on turn 2 being a real possibility in this deck, and that Christmas Land Dream starts with the wonderfully soft pillow that is Mox Amber. Now, you probably already noticed that that number is, in fact, a 4. Yeah, we're playing the entire playset here. And yes, it was a hard decision, and yes, I waffled back and forth between 3 and 4 copies of this a lot during testing. But in the end, locked it in at the whole playset. I really think it's important to play 4 copies because we're trying to ensure some really busted starts via Mox Amber. And to do that as consistently as possible, we just have to play the playset. And it turns out that having 4 of these in your deck is even less of a liability than you might think it is at first, because if you get 2 Mox Ambers in your opening hand, then often you can just kind of play them like lotus petals. That's how I like to look at it, at least, you know. You can play the first Mox Amber, tap it for mana, play the second Mox Amber, nix the first one, but hey, look, you've got another untapped Mox Amber to work with. So if you do get like 2 Mox Ambers in your starting hand, it usually just translates into these, huge mana turns on turn 2 and 3, which is totally fine too. But an important bit about Mox Amber is that it has become, my opinion at least, over the last few weeks, that to make Mox Amber worth playing in Standard, it has to do more for you than just be fast mana. It kind of sounds crazy coming out because fast mana is always really good, but to put it more simply, Mox Amber has to be able to do something for us even when it can't actually tap for mana. And we've got a couple of ways that Mox Amber is good for us, even if it's not currently tapping. For instance, on turn 1, it enables Spire of Industry, which can be amazing if you don't have a real colored source of mana in your hand, but you do have a Spire and a Mox Amber. All you gotta do is drop both of them, and suddenly, Spire of Industry taps for colored mana on turn 1, and you can play Oviya Pashiri, Lionel Elves, or whatever else you've got in your hand. So that can actually be really important sometimes. We're also playing Hazoret the Fervent in this deck, though, and Mox Amber helps out with that. We have to have 1 or 0 cards to swing with Hazoret the Fervent, and Mox Amber costs nothing. So playing 4 copies of a card that costs 0 mana helps you dump your hand really quickly and swing with Hazoret as fast as possible. Now, bottom line, we've got 15 different legends that help enable your Mox Amber, and I want to just slide this in real quick before I move on. I know a lot of you know this already, but some of you don't. I just want to keep you out of trouble. Colorless legends won't matter. They won't help enable your Mox Amber. Colorless is not, in fact, a color. So you can't tap your Mox Amber for colorless if you have an artifact legend of some kind out. Just want to clear that up. You can't do that. But we do have 15 legends that will help Mox Amber produce a color, and we want to get it going as quickly as possible. So I think that 4 copies of Oviya Pashiri is more or less a given. Now, I do think it's imperative that we play 4 because above all else, what the deck wants to do more than anything is go turn 1, green source, Oviya, Mox, something else. That is the ultimate dream of the deck. So we want to enable that as much as possible. We'll play all 4 copies of Oviya. We also have a total of 31 creatures and 5 vehicles in this deck to help enable Oviya. Once you do get to tap for her 5 mana ability, she can sometimes create easily the biggest creature on the battlefield. But there's actually a lot more to love about Oviya Pashiri. I really heavily discounted this card at first, but it turns out that her initials are appropriate. She does a lot right now, against control. She's a never-ending creature factory that's, anti-settle the wreckage because she never has to attack herself. She gets on the board really, really early. She's a mana sink for this deck, which we kind of need. There's just a lot of good stuff about Oviya Pashiri. But we got to move on here so I can show you the 4 copies of Lionel Elves that we're playing, because everybody knows by now that the ultimate dream scenario for this deck is to go turn 1, green source, Oviya Pashiri, Mox Amber into Lionel Elves. That'll, of course, allow you to have 4 mana on turn 2 if you get your land drop. That lets you play Hazoret on turn 2. You usually can't swing with her, but whatever. by turn 3 you'll definitely get to swing with her. Or you can play another 4-drop creature. But even if you don't get that second land drop, you've still got an easy 3 mana on turn 2. And you can just play a 3-drop, which is still often very fine. So this just enables the most busted starts in all of Standard. We've got to play the entire playset. Because if we're going to get that Mox Amber off of a turn 1 Oviya, this is probably the best thing we can play off of that Mox Amber. But there's actually way more 1-drops in the deck because I want to be able to get something off of Oviya Pashiri into Mox Amber on turn 1. So with that in mind, just in case we do miss Lawn War Elves, we can play Adventurous Impulse, which we're just going to run a 2 of here. Honestly, I think this might be the most cuttable card from the main deck, but I also think that could end up being terrible advice because Adventurous Impulse does so much for us in this deck. Not only can we play it off of, Oviya into Mox on turn 1, but if we don't get any of that stuff, we can just play it on turn 1. That'll help us find lands if we need them, drives down the land count in that way. That's pretty good. Also helps find red sources that we might need. That's super important. And also, got to point this out, helps us find the legends that we need to enable Mox Amber. If we get Mox Amber in our opening hand, but we don't get an Oviya or a 2-drop legend, then Adventurous Impulse will help us find those too. So it just does like 3 or 4 insanely important things for the deck, and I think it should go in. But if we're going to get Mox Amber to work as quickly as possible, we have to play more than just Oviya Pashiri. So I'm also going to play 3 copies of Kari Zev in the deck. This is just a good aggressive card, period, and we are definitely trying to be a very fast, very aggressive deck. So Kari Zev's good at that. Plus, she's kind of good on defense too right now in the early game. Another reason to play her. But we're mostly playing her to help enable that Mox Amber as quickly as possible. But to actually go back down to the 1-drops for just a second here, I wanted another 1-drop that we could play both off of turn 1 Oviya into Mox Amber and off of turn 2 Kari Zev into Mox Amber. And that 1-drop turned out to be Bomat Courier, which is insanely good. Everybody knows that, but it's especially good in a deck that's trying to be aggressive, which we very well are. And it's an artifact that helps enable the Spire of Industry really early in the game too. Helps refill our hand later on in the game when we need it to. It's just, everything about this is awesome. Plus, it's worth pointing out that it has haste. So if you do go like turn 2, Kari Zev, Mox Amber, Bomat, you can go ahead and swing with the Bomat that turn, which is pretty neat. Same thing, by the way, if you go, turn 1, Oviya into Mox into Bomat, just get to swing with your Bomat on turn 1, and you've got a hella developed board already. So Bomat Courier is just the cheese in this deck. It's got to go in all 4 copies. But to actually finally finish off the 1-drops, I know it took a while. We had to pause and talk about a 2-drop in the middle of the 1-drops just to kind of break things up here. But I'm also going to play 2 copies of Greenbelt Rampager because this too does so much for us in the deck. Not only can we also play this off of turn 1 Oviya into Mox and just get a free energy out of it, sometimes kind of important, but this will also crew Heart of Kiran if we wanted to. It'll also, by the way, give us energy for the Ether Hub and the Mana Base, which I really want to make work. We don't have room for all the lands in the world in this deck, so I want the lands that we do play to be capable of producing both colors of mana. For that reason, we got to play Ether Hub. Greenbelt helps out with that, but it does so much more too. And when it finally sticks, it's a pretty big body. But we're playing some vehicles in this deck, so let me go ahead and show you the 3 copies of Heart of Kiran and the 2 copies of Aethersphere Harvester here. Now, we've got 11 different creatures in this deck that can crew a Heart of Kiran on turn 3, assuming that we don't get any mana ramp at all in the early turns, and we usually will. So if we get any ramp, there are even more creatures that can crew this early on in the game. So we have no problem finding a suitable pilot for it, and I think we should play it even though a lot of the format is gaming against it. It's still amazing. It's a flying creature with 4 power. We really don't have a whole lot of evasive creatures in this deck, and Heart of Kiran is a 2-mana giant power one. We should do that, but even the Vigilance is relevant these days because it protects it from Seal Away, so just another point in its favor. Heart of Kiran, we should definitely play, and I should, by the way, mention that it's even more synergistic than that. This, too, helps out the Spire of Industry and the Mana Base, as does the Aethersphere Harvester. This is an artifact for that, but it does so much more too. This will provide energy for our Ether Hub, or we can get energy from Greenbelt Rampager or a couple of other cards in the deck to help give this lifelink if we absolutely need to. It's really good against aggro in just about every situation, and it's fantastic against most flyers in the format not named Lyra Dawnbringer. You know, blocks Rekindling Phoenix, blocks Glorybringer and stuff. Glorybringer can't hit it before it crews, so that's important too. Just Aethersphere is still a very, very good card in this format. And, by the way, another thing you can do with it, I wasn't even counting Aethersphere Harvester when I said that we had 11 different, turn 3 pilots for a Heart of Kiran. Always remember, too, that you can crew an Aethersphere Harvester and then funnel that into crewing a Heart of Kiran if you really want to. We're also going to play 4 copies of Voltaic Brawler in here because it is the absolute perfect card for this deck. It just does literally everything that we want. This is a fast, aggressive deck that wants to deal big chunks of damage in the early game. This is capable of doing that all by itself, so it's good even if there's no other cards around it in the early game. But there's all these little synergies that it contributes to. Obviously, it's another energy card, and we need that. It contributes to all the other energy stuff. You know how energy works by now. But this also crews Heart of Kiran at a pretty cheap cost, which is relevant too. But one last thing, in this deck, there's a secret mode on this card that leads to yet another ridiculously busted start for us. If we go turn 1 green source into Llanowar Elves, turn 2 red source into Kari Zev, we can drop Mox Amber, and then we have the mana to drop a Voltaic Brawler, which is a disgusting turn 2. But it's been a while since I've shown you a legend, so I should probably hop to that. Luckily, we've got a lot of good legends available to us in the 3-drop slots. So let me show you what we're doing with these slots here. We're going to play 2 copies of Rishkar, Pima Renegade, 2 copies of Pia Nalar, and 1 copy of Ronus the Indomitable. There's actually a lot of tech between these 3 cards, so much so that I wanted them all to have a place in the deck somewhere. At one point I was just playing 3 Ronus and saying screw Rishkar, but Rishkar is actually very important against Goblin Chain Whirler, which is a card we absolutely hate and also happens to kind of be everywhere right now. But Rishkar can come down sometimes even on the draw earlier than their Goblin Chain Whirler and help protect whatever you played so far. So that's a good function of Rishkar, but it also obviously just makes our creatures bigger. That's good aggression right there. And it helps us produce even more mana, so I'll take at least a couple of copies of Rishkar. As far as Pia goes, though, this and Rishkar, by the way, and Ronus, all 3 of these, can crew a Heart of Kiran. So I should point that out, but for Pia Nalar, obviously you have to tap her and the Thopter, but you can do it. Aside from that, though, she's really good because she allows you to sacrifice Mox Ambers that you don't need anymore for value. That's awesome. Sack him, a dude can't block this turn. And note, by the way, Mox Amber can tap itself to pay for Pia Nalar's ability. That's kind of a cool synergy, but this also allows Bomat Couriers and Heart of Kirans and Aethersphere Harvesters to get a little bit bigger. She's a mana sink in that way too. So Pia Nalar also one of those cards that just kind of does everything. I just rattled off 5 things that she does. She should be in the deck. As far as Ronus, though, I may have only wanted 1 copy of this at the end of the day, but I still think it's important in the deck for a number of reasons. The reason that I ended up on 1 copy was note how many 1-power creatures I pointed out earlier. Those are typically kind of really bad with Ronus, so I didn't think we needed more than the 1 copy, really, but 1 copy is still important because we've got enough creatures that are either naturally 4 power and above, or we can pump to 4 power by just using Ronus's activated ability once. I think it's still worth playing it. Plus, this works good with Heart of Kiran for a couple of reasons. Obviously, this can crew a Heart of Kiran even if it can't attack. But if we've got a smaller creature that can crew a Heart of Kiran, well, that enables our Ronus to swing. So they kind of work well with each other. But now we can finish off the creatures, and the main deck actually, by showing you the 3 copies of Hazaret the Fervent and the 2 copies of Bristling Hydra. Now, I shouldn't have to explain Hazaret too much, we empty our hand really fast in this deck, so Hazaret can get to swinging as early as turn 3. It is very hard to get her swinging on turn 2. It usually involves hands that have multiple Mox Ambers in them. It is at least possible, but often you're going to get the dog swinging on turn 3, which is definitely fast enough. But as good as Haz is, I still wanted to make room for a couple of copies of Bristling Hydra here. This is actually one of the most recent additions to the deck, but it's one that I'm really glad that I made in the long run. We needed more 4-drops, just in case we do get that crazy, 4-drop on turn 2 start that we're dreaming of. But again, it is super easy, whether you're going, turn 1 Llanowar Elves or turn 2 Kari Zev into Mox. It is incredibly easy to get to 4 mana by turn 3 in this deck, and Bristling Hydra is still fine on turn 3. We're in a format that's shifted towards a lot of the premium removal that's available right now, so Bristling Hydra is looking really, really good again. And here's our mana base. We have pushed it all the way down as low as we could go, to 18 lands. But don't worry, again, we've got 4 Mox Amber, 4 Lionel Elves, and even a couple of Adventurous Impulse to help keep this mana base as low as possible. As long as you get green source on turn 1, you should be in the money, and you've got until turn 2 to find a red source, and there are a potential 12 of those. So this mana base works a little bit better than you might think, and don't discount what I said earlier about Mox Amber, enabling Spire of Industry on turn 1. That is much more relevant than you might realize. It happens all the time. But here's our sideboard right here, and this is one of the hardest things in the entire deck to get shored up. But we obviously want some number of Blossoming Defense in there. Now you see the Crushing Canopy here. I have chosen to play that over Fight with Fire as an option against Lyra Dawnbringer, which we're not seeing as many of lately, but Lyra Dawnbringer, once she comes down, just absolutely demolishes this deck, and we really don't have a lot of answers. So Crushing Canopy is a good answer for her, and also helps deal with, bothersome enchantments, the same way Thrashing Brontodon does. This is another card with a lot of versatility that's seeing play in a lot of mono-green sideboards, but honestly, given the choice, I think I would rather play it over Fight with Fire if we're looking for something to kill Lyra Dawnbringer, just because it does so much more than just that. You also see the Lifecrafter's Bestiary. This is for control decks. If you're facing off against blue-white, we want to outdraw them, and Lifecrafter's Bestiary is a good way of doing that in a deck with 31 natural creatures. So, yeah, we should probably play Lifecrafters. And also Nissa Vital Force is in there against control decks. This is a great recursive engine that allows us to keep getting our guys back after they die, or just ultimate her really, really easily, and again, help outdraw them in the long game. It's something that we really need to do. Both abilities are very desirable. So I'm going to play Nissa, especially considering that after boards, we can get to a 5-mana card like turn 3 some of the time, depending on our starts. It's really not, unheard of to get this in under a disallow as long as we're on the play. So this has all the play against control. I want to play a couple of copies at least. And here are them power rankings right here. A final score of 68 points. That's a lot, but it's mostly because of crazy scores in speed and synergy and offense. It's mostly what carries this deck. It's not resilient at all. You may have noticed that. It's not versatile at all. You may have noticed that, but it gets high marks in the categories it really cares about. That 10 in speed is very real. This is, to my mind, the fastest deck in the current standard. You sacrifice a little bit to get those insanely fast starts. We're not playing much higher up on the curve. There's problems with that. We're playing a ton of 1-drops. I'm sure you noticed that too. There are issues with that, but you pay a price to be as fast as we are, and we're more than willing to pay that price. We've got an insanely good game 1 against a lot of decks because we just get up under most of what control is trying to do, and we force them to have Settle the Wreckage and other very specific answers. Even decks that play Goblin Chainwhirler, again, a card we hate, we can sometimes just really pile on way too much before they even get to Chainwhirler. I'm telling you, if we're on the play, our turn 3s, our turn 2s are sometimes just ludicrous. So this deck has all the speed it needs. But again, the deck is consistent. Not only do we have almost a 1 in 3 chance of getting Oviya Pashiri into Mox Amber on turn 1, but when you move it up to turn 2, we have almost 70% chance of getting Mox Amber to fire off. And when you move up to turn 3, we have a nearly 90% chance of getting Mox Amber to tap for mana. So the actual abusing of Mox Amber is fairly reliable in this deck, even early on in the game. And I really want to hammer this in. This isn't just a Mox Amber deck. Because of cards like Heart of Kiran and, the fact that we have 11 things that can crew it by turn 3. Even if this deck doesn't get an out-of-control start, even if it doesn't get the Christmas Land of Oviya and the Mox and the Lionel Elves or whatever, it's still got just like basic curve-out starts that are super dumb, Being able to go Bomat Courier into Heart of Kiran into literally anything that crews Heart of Kiran on turn 3 has proven to be a dumb start in Standard for like the last 2 years. So even if you don't do something really busted, you're still usually doing something pretty busted. If you did want to build it, I actually have good news. This is a competitive deck. It is not budget, really, by any means, but it is a lot less than you could be paying for a competitive deck in the Standard, especially one that feels this disgusting. Right now this deck is only about $150 on TCG Player. They just happen to be my sponsor, just so you know. Click the first link in the description. Not only will you be able to view this deck list, but you'll be able to buy it from TCG Player. And if you be a little discerning with your vendors, you'll note that a lot of these cards have gone down in value over the last couple of weeks. Heart of Kiran was like $5 a week ago. Now it's like half of that for some reason. So a lot of these cards have actually, not necessarily bottomed out, but gone down in price over the last couple of weeks, which has made this deck, the end result relatively cheap. $150 actually is not that much to ask for the fastest deck in Standard. So click that link. And with that, I'm pretty sure I'm tapped out. But make sure you do all the stuff. Like the video if you enjoyed the video. Hope you did. Did a lot of work on this one and all the other ones. Hope you enjoyed them all. You should also sub if you're new. Hit the bell for the notifications because the Standard tier list is coming up super soon. Get jacked about that. Plus, Core Set 2019 spoilers are already coming out, and I should probably start covering those very soon. So make sure you sub for all the content, hit the bell for the notifications, and follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, or throw $1 in the Patreon pot over at patreon.com/SBMTG, link in the description. If you throw me $1, I'll let you know what decks we're doing the day before they come out, and you'll get to participate in polls to vote on what decks you want to see. So do all that stuff, and I'm pretty sure that I'm done for this one, you guys. I am going to go to sleep because it is actually like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I haven't slept from the last day. So yeah, it's 9:07 a.m. So I should probably get to editing and then sleeping around 11 or 12, something like that. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.